I still remember the moment as though it happened yesterday. I was standing at the kitchen counter, spoon hovering over a bowl of cereal, when my phone buzzed. Morning sunlight slanted through the half-open blinds, dust motes dancing in the golden haze. I glanced at the screen without thinking. It was a text from my boyfriend, Alex. I swallowed, cereal forgotten. I'm done. I've emptied our rent account. I'm out. Good luck. That was it. No emojis, no apology. Just 4 lines in black text on a white background. My hand went cold. Slowly, I sank onto a bar stool. My heart thundered in my ears. I blinked, wondering if I'd misread it. But the timestamp stared back at me, 8:02 a.m. My mind raced. I stared at the bowl, milk sloshing at the rim. I wanted to throw it against the wall, to shout into the silence of our apartment. But instead, I just sat there, trembling, trying to process what emptied our rent account even meant. Our rent account. The one we'd opened together the day we moved in 6 months ago. We'd agreed to split everything down the middle, utilities, groceries, rent. I'd set aside my portion every paycheck. He had. We were responsible adults, or so I thought. But now, responsible felt like a lie. I stared at the buzzing phone as if it might spring to life and rewrite itself. But it didn't. I was alone with that message, and the morning light felt suddenly harsh, unforgiving. I traced the edges of my coffee mug, fumbling for warmth. My mind tumbled back to yesterday evening. We'd argued, again, about something trivial. I can't even remember what now. It was a comment I made about his job search. He took it as me judging him, so he stalked off in a huff, slamming the bedroom door. I called his name, but he didn't answer. I half-slammed my own door, then went to bed with my thoughts spinning. I never imagined this morning would be the ultimatum. I sat there for a long minute before giving in to the quake in my chest. I opened my banking app with trembling fingers. Sure enough, the balance read 0.0, not a single dollar left. My portion of the rent, my security deposit, everything gone. I felt an icy weight settle in my stomach. My first impulse was to race down to his office, find him, demand answers. But a calmer voice in my head said, "Sit down, breathe." So I did. I closed my eyes and took a shuddering breath. Memories flooded in. Our first apartment hunt, how excited we'd been to find a small 2-bedroom that was just within our budget. The day we signed the lease, he'd bought me daisies to celebrate. I'd never seen daisies in December before. We laughed at how ridiculous they looked in the dull overhead lights of the leasing office, and now he'd thrown it all away with 4 cold lines of text. Everything felt surreal. I stood up, bolstered by a strange, numbing resolve. I grabbed my keys off the counter and headed out. As I walked down the hallway, boxes from our last grocery haul sat by the door. I paused, pressed my hand against the cool metal of the doorknob, and let myself out into the quiet corridor. The morning felt bigger now, echoing. The elevator ride down was agonizingly slow, like time itself was stretching, just to make me feel every second. Outside, a crisp breeze brushed against my face. The sun was climbing, illuminating the city skyline beyond our block. Cars hummed past, oblivious to my personal crisis. I realized then that life would go on whether I wanted it to or not. But first, I had to figure out how to survive today. My rent was due tomorrow. I had no money in that account. The landlord would call. Notices would go up. I exhaled, steeling myself against panic. On the walk to the nearby cafe, I replayed that text over and over. Why did he leave like this? What had I done? I remembered the look on his face last night, hurt and anger coiled into a rigid mask. He'd been frustrated with me, sure, but I'd thought it was just another petty fight. I never suspected he'd take our rent money as some twisted leverage. A dull ache settled behind my eyes. I pushed it down. At the cafe, I pushed open the door, and the bell above it chimed. The smell of fresh coffee and baked goods hit me like a comforting blanket. I ordered a latte, heavy on oat milk, exactly how he hated it. I wondered, not for the first time, if he'd even remember that detail. I took my cup to a corner table, opened my laptop, and stared at the screen. I needed to make a plan. I emailed my landlord right away. "Good morning, Mr. Patel. I wanted to let you know there was an unexpected issue with my rent payment this month. I am transferring funds from my personal account as we speak. You should see the deposit by noon today. Please let me know if there are any problems. Thank you for understanding." I paused before hitting send, my finger hovering. I'd checked my savings last night, my emergency fund, enough to cover rent for 3 months if I was careful. It was money I'd socked away since I'd moved to the city, saving every extra dollar so I'd never feel helpless. I pressed send. The email went off before I could second-guess myself. My latte arrived, steam curling toward the ceiling. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, closed my eyes, and let the heat seep into my bones. I was surprised at how calm I felt. Alex might think he'd left me stranded, but he didn't know me as well as he thought. He had no idea I'd already made plans for just this kind of disaster. I took a slow sip, letting the richness of the coffee steady my nerves. Plans. That word felt powerful on my tongue. Across the cafe, people chatted on laptops or flipped through their phones. The barista called out orders in a sing-song voice. Outside, sweat dripped from a bicyclist's brows as he made his morning deliveries. The world churned forward. For a moment, I let myself breathe in the ordinary scenes, remembering that I lived in a city where anything could happen, and I could handle it. I reread my email to Mr. Patel, waiting for a reply. 5 minutes passed. Then the ding. Fund received. Thank you. His reply was brief, as expected. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Rent secured. Crisis averted. At least for today. I sat back and raked my fingers through my hair. I'd been with Alex for just shy of 2 years. We'd moved in together after I turned 30. He was 32. He was charming, passionate, and had a knack for making me laugh when I needed it most. We'd shared so many milestones. First apartment, first vacation, our anniversary dinners. I'd met his parents, and he'd met mine. We'd talked, dreamy, naive talk, of maybe getting married someday. But I'd always known I needed a safety net. I was independent by nature. I'd learned early that love can tangle with reality, and reality can come undone faster than you think. I returned to the apartment to gather my things. The place was eerily silent. His side of the bed, the side I usually slept on, was neatly made, unrumpled. His clothes, half folded in the closet, stared back at me like ghosts. I grabbed my laptop bag, waved at the mail stationery on the counter, still unopened, and slipped on sneakers. I moved methodically, as if packing a suitcase for a trip. In truth, I was packing for my new single life. I shoved essentials into a backpack, a change of clothes, my journal, toiletries, a book I was reading. I paused at a framed photo on the dresser. Us at Central Park last winter, smiling, ice skates on our feet. My chest tightened. I hesitated. I thought about sending him a final message, something to let him know I wasn't ruined, that he hadn't broken me. But then I pictured his face as I'd seen it on the couch last night. Flushed, eyes glassy, anger clinging to his features. I decided against it. Closure, I reminded myself, was mine to define. I zipped up the backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and walked to the door. The hallway outside our apartment felt long and empty. Upstairs, neighbors were playing music already, a muffled bass line echoing through the floor vents. I walked down the staircase 2 at a time, each step echoing. I didn't look back. By late morning, I was at my friend's apartment 2 blocks away. Mia opened the door before I even knocked. She'd been my roommate 3 years ago, before Alex. Her face registered shock when she saw me, backpack slung over my shoulder, mascara smudged under my eyes. She enveloped me in a hug, squeezing tight. "Lily, what happened?" she whispered. I let tears slip for a moment. "He left me. Texted me that he emptied our rent account and he was gone." Mia's mouth dropped. "No way. Are you okay? Did you need anything?" I pulled back, managing a small smile. "I'm fine. I've already taken care of rent. I need a place to crash for a bit." She ushered me inside. "You can stay here as long as you need. Come on, let me make you some tea." I followed her into the living room, her cat, Luna, mewed at my backpack. Mia handed me a mug. I took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread. "How did you know to cover rent?" she asked gently. I traced a crack in the coffee table with my fingertip. "I save for emergencies. I figured something like this might happen eventually. You know, people can be selfish." She nodded, eyes soft. "I'm so sorry. That's shit." I let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, but you know, it's not over. He thinks I'm screwed, but I'm not." I spent the next hour on the couch with Mia, processing everything. At one point, I checked my phone. Another text from Alex. "Please answer me." I stared at that message. His desperation felt hollow, too late. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my calendar. Next month, I'd booked a solo trip to visit my sister in Portland, a fortuitous purchase 6 weeks ago. Non-refundable. I had plane tickets, Airbnb reservations, and a plane change notice because I'd upgraded for more leg room. That trip was my lifeline, my escape hatch. The plan: leave here in 7 days, clear my head, regroup. I sketched a mental timetable. Today to tomorrow, get basics, clear my head. Wednesday, notify my job and reset my mailing address. Thursday, declutter the apartment, box up my things for storage. Friday, meet with the landlord to sign a new lease in my name. Saturday, spend a night at a friend's spare room just to separate from the apartment. Sunday, fly to Portland. Monday, arrive, hug my sister, breathe. With that roadmap, I felt a surge of control, like I'd wrested the author's pen back from Alex. I was no longer the character playing his script. I was the one writing the story. I texted my boss. "Hey, I need a couple of days to handle a personal situation. I'll be back Thursday." I hesitated before hitting send, but I did, because this couldn't wait. Work would survive, and so would I. Later that afternoon, I packed what I hadn't already packed from the apartment. I transferred some clothes, shoes, and my laptop to Mia's spare room. My walls, a collage of postcards and Polaroids, came down. I wrapped them in paper, tucked them in a bike box she had. I filled small boxes with kitchenware, my favorite mug, a cast iron skillet, my set of French press accessories. Each item felt like a bitter reminder, but I folded each memory into a neat square of packing paper and let it go. The house felt quieter now that my things were out. The echo of loneliness threatened to swell, but I pressed on. At 6:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. I glanced at the number. It was him. Alex. My hand tightened around the edge of a cardboard box. I didn't answer. He sent another text. "We need to talk, please." I watched those words linger in the screen glow. My chest tightened, but then I reminded myself, he emptied our rent account. He tossed me out without a second thought. Why should I drop everything for him? I didn't reply. I sat on Mia's couch and let out a slow breath. The city lights flickered on outside. Somewhere, car horns honked, phones buzzed, life rumbling on. I felt a steady burn of righteous anger, but also a budding sense of freedom. I was allowed to be angry, allowed to feel betrayed, but I also had permission to move forward. Night fell, and we ordered Thai food for dinner. Pad Thai and spring. Rolls, just like old times. We talked about everything but Alex, work, travel dreams, absurd YouTube videos. For a moment, I forgot the text that had shattered my morning. When I finally lay in the spare bedroom that night, Luna curled at my feet, I stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be a new day. I closed my eyes, resolving not to let him define me. The next morning, I woke at 7:30 a.m., the sun slanting and pale through the curtains. I poured myself a cup of tea while Mia slept. I sat by the window overlooking the street, watching commuters hurry to the subway. I texted my landlord, "I'll be by at 2 p.m. to sign a lease in my name. Thank you again for your patience." No sense hiding the truth. The old lease was in both our names. Now it needed to be just mine. By mid-morning, I was back at the apartment. I slipped inside, keys feeling foreign in my hand. The living room was silent. A broom lay near the stove, half used. My mailbox was empty. I walked over to the kitchen and opened the cabinet where I kept cleaning supplies. I grabbed the broom and swept floor to ceiling. Dust bunnies had gathered under the couch, evidence I hadn't been here for more than a morning. But I kept sweeping, determined to scrub away the ghost of Alex's betrayal. Time passed into early afternoon. I checked my watch, 1:45 p.m. I left for Mr. Patel's office 15 minutes early. The walk was brisk. Autumn wind cut through my jacket. My mind replayed the text. "I'm done. I'm out." There was an odd clarity in that phrase. He was out of my life. No more excuses. No more half-promises. Just a blank slate. I found Mr. Patel's small office in a brownstone courtyard. His door was slightly ajar. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. Gray hair cut short, wrinkles around kind eyes. He shook my hand firmly. "Ms. Harris. Good to see you again?" "Mr. Patel," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "Thank you for meeting me." He pointed to a stack of papers on his desk. The lease amendment in my name. I skimmed the pages. Legalese confirming I'd be solely responsible for rent, utilities, the condition of the apartment. No mention of Alex. I heard my own heartbeat as I signed, initialing each page. There was something cathartic in it. Me taking ownership of the space, of my life. I slid the last page across and Mr. Patel handed me a copy. "Everything looks good," he said. "Rent will be due on the 1st, as always." I nodded. "Understood, and thank you for working with me." He leaned back. "You seem resilient." "I'm sorry about what happened," I offered a small smile. "Things happen. I'm okay." We shook hands. As I left, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in months. The apartment staircase felt different now. Mine, without him. That evening, I returned to Mia's with groceries, fresh vegetables, tofu, and my favorite spice blend. We cooked dinner together, laughing as I attempted to chop onions, eyes watering. I used to share that space with Alex, but now it felt right with just me and Mia. I told her about the lease signing. She gave me a tight hug. "You're doing great," she said. I let the words sink in. Over the next few days, I spent time dividing my things. The apartment needed to be vacated before the weekend. I rented a small storage unit, just enough for furniture and boxes. Each day, I ferried belongings across town, using my compact car to shuttle boxes, suitcases, and photo albums. I kept everything organized. Clothes in labeled bins, books stacked neatly, furniture wrapped in blankets. I paused a few times, looking around the empty apartment as the walls shrank without my presence. But I refused to let nostalgia weaken. On Thursday afternoon, I posted a notice on the apartment door. "For rent, October 1st. The bottom line of the slip fluttered in the breeze. My moving date was coming. I stepped back, chest tight, and let the reality settle. The place that held so many memories would soon belong to someone else. That made me sad, but also relieved. I felt ready for a fresh start. That night, I lay in Mia's guest bed and opened my journal. I wrote until the early hours. Thoughts about the exile, being forced out without warning, how betrayal cuts deeper than any argument. But I also wrote about empowerment, how I'd covered rent, secured a new lease, packed my life with my own hands. As dawn approached, I placed a fresh pen on the bedside table and closed my eyes, exhaustion lulling me to sleep. Friday morning, I visited the bank to set up a new rent account solely in my name. I deposited the balance from my savings that covered the next 2 months. I printed out statements, emailed them to Mr. Patel, and updated autopay settings. By noon, everything was confirmed. Rent secure through December. Rent reminders set for the 1st of each month. I felt a glow in my chest. Unlike the panic I felt Tuesday morning, this was power. This was dignity. Back at Mia's, I took a shower and dressed for lunch with my sister, Gabrielle, who lived a few states away but was in town for a work conference. We met at a small bistro near the river. She had flown in last night when I texted her the news. Her face crumpled when I told her Alex had emptied our rent account. "He's a coward," she said, reaching across the table to grip my hand. "You don't deserve this." I squeezed her hand. "I'm okay. I've got it under control." But hearing her voice, seeing her worry, reminded me how lucky I was to have family. We ordered sandwiches and salads, old jokes resurfacing between bites. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. But I knew everything had changed. My life had pivoted on a single text, and I was moving forward. Saturday afternoon, I spent the final hours in the apartment. A friend had agreed to take my furniture, couch, dining table, bed frame. They came with a moving van, 2 burly guys who loaded everything in less than an hour. I watched as my life was packed onto a truck. Photo frames, lamps, bookshelves. I felt an odd mixture of sorrow and relief. I texted Mr. Patel confirmation that I'd turned in the keys by noon tomorrow. When the last box was loaded, I stood alone in the empty apartment. Sunlight streamed through bare windows. I walked to the living room window and looked out at the street below. Kids riding bikes, dogs barking at squirrels, neighbors walking to their cars. The city marched on. I reached into my pocket and touched my phone. "I'm ready." The text came from Alex. He sent another. "Can we talk?" I stared at those messages for a long time. Then I deleted them, one by one. No response. No final words. Just an empty apartment. I walked to the front door, locked it, and pocketed the key in a small envelope. On the way out, I paused at the stairwell, took a deep breath, and turned to leave without a backward glance. That evening, I sat in Mia's living room, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights flicker. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but my curiosity won. It was an email notification from Airbnb. "Your reservation to Portland begins in 48 hours. I clicked it. Flight details, check-in info, my sister's address. The words on the screen felt like a promise. I smiled, closing my eyes. He had no idea I'd made plans, and those plans were going to carry me far beyond his reach. Sunday dawned chilly and gray. I loaded my bags into the car, 3 suitcases, a backpack, and a duffel bag. I double-checked everything. Passport, plane tickets, chargers, my favorite hoodie. I sent my final message to Mr. Patel. "The keys are in the drop box. Thank you again for everything." Then I locked up the storage unit and dropped off the last of my things. It felt surreal to drive away from that neighborhood one last time, knowing I wouldn't return. The airport was crowded, lines of people wheeling suitcases, children tugging at parents, business travelers clutching laptops. I stood in line at the ticket counter, heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and nervousness. My boarding pass printed, and I clutched it like a lifeline. He'd thought he broke me. But the next 48 hours would remind me just how strong I was. On the plane, I stared out the window as the city disappeared beneath me. Buildings, streets, the apartment where I'd almost given up. It all shrank into a patchwork quilt of lights. I exhaled, letting tears slip without shame. The hum of the engines was a steady lullaby. I thought of Alex, image drifting in my mind like an old photograph. He was alone in our empty apartment, discovering too late that I'd organized my life beyond his betrayal. He had no idea what was coming. As we rose into the clouds, I closed my eyes and swallowed the knot in my throat. The world felt full of possibility. In 2 hours, I'd be in Portland, my sister waiting at the airport with open arms. A city of rain and green parks and coffee shops where I could disappear for a while. I pictured us hugging, the relief in her eyes, the cinnamon donuts she'd bring me. And when I stepped out into that chilly Pacific Northwest air, I would leave behind everything that threatened to drag me down. In that quiet cocoon of the cabin, I realized something. Plans aren't just for escape, they're for rebirth. I was rewriting my story, not as a chapter in Alex's life, but as the heroine of my own. I reached into my bag, pulled out my journal, and wrote 3 words on the top line of a fresh page. I am enough. Beneath that, I began listing the places I wanted to visit in Portland: Powell's Books, International Rose Test Garden, a small cafe my sister raved about. When the plane banked and dipped, I felt a shiver of exhilaration. He had emptied our rent account, thought he'd left me with nothing. But he didn't know that I'd already made plans. I felt a surge of gratitude, to myself, for saving those funds, for believing I could handle any curveball. I pressed my palm to the window, watching as the sky turned from hazy gray to pale pink at sunset. I was no longer sitting at a cafe, staring at my empty bowl of cereal. I was in motion, climbing toward a new horizon. By the time we began our descent, I had a smile on my face. Below, the Pacific Northwest landscape stretched out. Emerald hills, winding rivers, twinkling city lights. I felt both small and infinite, a single story in a vast tapestry. The flight attendant's voice crackled over the intercom. "We'll be landing in 20 minutes. Please return your seatbacks and tray tables to their upright positions." I clicked my seatbelt tight, my heart calm and steady. When the wheels hit the runway, a gentle thud echoed through the cabin. I exhaled, letting the tension slip from my shoulders. I packed away my journal and phone, preparing to step into whatever awaited me at the gate. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard the echo of Alex's text. Good luck. But luck, I realized, was just the intersection of preparation and opportunity. I'd already made my own luck. The doors opened, and I rose, gathering my things. Fellow passengers shuffled past, eager to disembark. When it was my turn, I stepped down from the plane and onto the jet bridge, each footstep carrying me further from his betrayal and closer to my future. I walked into the terminal and spotted my sister at the end of the gate corridor, her arms wide, a grin lighting up her face. "Lily!" she called out, voice cracking with emotion. I dropped my bags and ran to her. We hugged, and I let tears spill down my cheeks, not tears of sorrow but of relief. She whispered, "Welcome home." And in that moment, I knew I was exactly where I belonged. Outside, as we walked toward her car, the air smelled of rain and pine. My sister chattered about the new coffee shop she'd found, about how she had a room with a view of the city. I listened, smiling, feeling alive. He had thought he left me with nothing. But I had my plans, my savings, my sister's love, my faith in myself. I had built my own safety net, one brick at a time. Later, when I sat on the balcony of her apartment overlooking the Willamette River, I opened my journal again. Across the next page, I wrote, "Rent account is full. Heart is full." Beneath that, I began mapping out ideas for my next steps. New job prospects, maybe a small studio near the river, a writing project to share my story. The city skyline sparkled across the water. I took a deep breath, tasting the crisp air. He had no idea I'd made plans, but I did. And as I watched the lights flicker on across the city, I knew the only thing that mattered was how I chose to move forward. I closed my eyes, letting the hush of Portland night surround me. The future beckoned, wide and open and impossible to empty.